How to go from calorie counting to intuitive eating. So if you've been stuck in diet culture for a long time, chances are you are a pro at calorie counting, at tracking macros, at weighing everything that you eat, at looking at labels, and at having very set specific times where you are allowed to eat, very specific portion sizes that you're allowed to have, a very specific way that your plate is supposed to look like. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that that is not the way that I like to do things. I don't think that it's the optimal way to nourish your body. It's definitely not the good thing to do if you want a healthy relationship with food. So I really advise people to go from these very deeply diet culture rooted habits to more intuitive eating. But the question I get asked a lot is, how do you do that? So how do you go from calorie counting to intuitive eating? Number one, move away from calorie counting. Instead of focusing your tracking of on calories, shift away from that. So how I would go about that is, instead of logging onto your app or whatever where you count calories, what you're going to be missing if you don't do that is this action of logging in and writing something down. So now I think it's just a good idea to switch what you're going to be writing about. So instead of logging in very precise calories, you can do it step by step. You can try logging in general amounts, being well, I didn't weigh this, I didn't exactly count this, but I probably had around this amount. So, that's a step-by-step thing. And then little by little, replace that with logging in how you feel. And this can be in terms of hunger and fullness, okay, I ate this meal and I felt a little too full. And that's going to give you insight that's going to be much more useful than the calories, because if you eat something and realize you feel a little bit too full, then you know that next time maybe you can have a little bit less. If you eat something and you still feel hungry, you know that next time you can eat a little bit more. And it's tailored to you, and it's not one arbitrary number. You can also track how you feel in terms of how much you wanted to eat that food, how appealing this food seems to you. That is the way that you can use your body signals and your intuitive way of eating in order to actually make choices that benefit you, again, that aren't arbitrary. Number two, you want to move away from macro tracking and then go more into just the general balanced aspect of a meal. So when you're macro tracking, you're going to be measuring the amount of protein, of carbs, of fat of your meal and making sure that everything checks out. You don't need to do that anymore. You can eat meals that are balanced in a way that is just more general and more fun and more intuitive. Instead of trying to break down everything, look at it as a whole. You can also look at different colors on your plate. You can be okay, maybe I can make this plate more colorful. Or again, you can tune into satisfaction and what would satisfy you. Again, our bodies are very good at telling us what we need, what we don't need. And if you have a plate with just pasta and veggies, your body's probably going to crave something that has a little more protein to add to it. So let your body speak. Let your body look at that plate and be what would sound good with this? And again, this is something you need to do little by little. Again, so what you can do is start by not measuring your macros. Start by just being okay, I'm going to have a protein, carb, and a fat, and then veggies, whatever. You can do that, but without measuring everything, without making sure that you have exactly the right amount of grams. You can just be okay, let me find a way to incorporate these into my plate. And again, as time goes on, you can tune more into what your body is telling you, and your body will be okay, this plate looks nice, but maybe it would feel even better if I added this to it. Number three, ease off the nutrition labels and instead ease into what you want, what you crave. So for instance, and what sounds good. So for instance, if you're looking at a nutrition label and you're okay, I'm gonna get the one that has the lowest amount of calories and the lowest amount of sugar and the highest amount of protein. Instead of doing that, look at the different food options and look at the one that sounds the most appealing to you, that looks the most appealing to you, and choose that one. And what you'll realize with this as time goes on is that if you're allowing yourself to have these options that you crave more and that are more appealing to you, you're going to be more satisfied with them with fewer quantities. You're going to be able to eat one protein bar that looks good to you just because it's the one that you initially wanted to go for. Whereas if you looked at the one that had the best like label the best ingredients, that one didn't taste good to you. You didn't really crave it, so you're gonna need to eat like 3, 4, 5 of them, and then probably a muffin or something to feel satisfied. Number 4, you need to stop labeling foods as good or bad and instead see everything as like neutral / like on a spectrum. You can look at foods from a like nutritious point of view. You can be like, okay, this food is gonna bring me more nutrients. This food is going to be more like a fun food and gonna satisfy my cravings. You can do that if it's too hard to see everything as neutral. That can be like the middle ground that you can find. But again, you really need to remember that the foods that you consider to be like the bad foods, the foods that are maybe a little bit less nutrient dense, these foods are absolutely essential to satisfy your cravings and to fulfill certain needs that won't be fulfilled with just other types of foods. And again, we're trying to shift away from diet culture, which then leads to bad habits like binge eating and like just like overeating way to the point of past the point of fullness. And these things happen when you're not satisfied with the foods that you're eating, and when you're labeling foods as good or bad, it's very hard to be satisfied even if you let yourself have like one cookie, because in your mind you're going to be like, this is a bad food, I shouldn't be having this isn't good. So for this step, you need to take both like physical measures and like mental measures, meaning that physically it's important that you allow yourself to buy all the foods, that you don't have off-limit foods, that you don't have foods where you tell yourself, no, I can't have this. So buy the foods, have the foods, be there as options. And then mentally, you need to destroy this mindset. Every time you have a voice that tells you, no, don't eat that, that's bad. No, you work on it. You tell yourself how important it is, like what I just talked about. And I have an entire video on letting go of fear foods because it is like a long process. So if you want to check that out, you can do so right here or in the description. Number 5, you need to stop following strict diet rules. This can be like intermittent fasting. This can be just eating at like specific times because you've heard that these are the best times to eat and you need to eat exactly like 4 hours apart, or eating like this amount of food at like this moment because or else you're gonna gain weight, whatever. All of this to the trash, and it needs to be more about listening to what your body is telling you, tuning into your own signals. Now, if you've been doing this for a while, if you've been ingrained in diet culture for a long time, of course this is going to be hard because your body's not going to be used to giving you signals anymore because it's just used to you not listening to them. So there is a ton of work to do in that aspect when it comes to intuitive eating. You can start with the hunger fullness scale. I have a video on that right here that you can check out, and I just have like an entire playlist as well on intuitive eating and like mindful eating. But basically with this scale, it will enable you to rate your hunger from like 1 to 10, 1 being you're absolutely starving, ravenous, you should never reach that point, and number 10, you're absolutely full to the point of being sick, again, you should never reach that point. And 5 is like the comfortable middle ground. So if you get used to rating your hunger before you eat on this scale and then after you eat on this scale as well, this will be the only tool you need to know if it's time to eat or not, and if it's time to stop eating or not, because that's what your body should be telling you. It's not the outside like rules that should be telling you that. Yes, and I do understand that, of course, sometimes there's a schedule you have to stick to, but when it comes to that, there are ways to adapt your schedule to your body or like tweak things a little bit so that they can be easier to handle. Your body needs to lead the way when it comes to like time management of things, and also in terms of what it wants, kind of like the points we talked about earlier. So really learning to tune into your body's signals is going to be crucial. And the way to do this is to just start doing it. At first, again, it's going to be hard. The signals are going to be subtle, but every time you have a signal, every time you have a hunger cue, act on it. Every time you have a certain craving, act on it. Every time you have a fullness cue, act on it. And all these things you're going to be acting on, it's going to be sending that signal. It's going to be reinforcing your body being able to send you these signals and you listening to them. And it's going to get easier and easier and easier. And number 6, that kind of ties everything together, you need to redefine the way that you measure progress. Because if you're ingrained in diet culture, chances are the only way you measure progress is by your weight number, like how much weight you've lost. And that will not work if you're transitioning to intuitive eating. Now, do I believe that intuitive eating will get you to your ideal set point weight? Yes, I do. However, is that weight necessarily lower than the weight you're currently at? We don't know. So it's super important that when you do this, you are ready for what comes in terms of weight gain or loss, and you find other ways to measure your progress. This is work that's super important. I do it a lot with my clients because they're so used to looking at their weights. They will tell me, if I ask them like how things are going, they'll tell me, oh, I gained weight. Sometimes it's really hard to notice all of the great changes, the other great changes that are happening, because you're so focused on your weight and you're thinking, this is not working, I'm doing all this work and my weight is not budging or it's getting higher, but you're not seeing all the other areas in which you're improving. So instead of those numbers, throw out your scale, throw out your like measuring tape, whatever, and look at these things. Look at how you're feeling in general in terms of satisfaction with your meals. Look at your obsession with food. Is it getting lower? Are you able to have other thoughts than like what you're going to be eating? Look at your appetite. Is it, and your hunger, is it ravenous like it used to be? Or are you able to feel satisfied now? Are you able to stop when you're actually full? Look at how you're able to listen to your cravings, to your hunger, to your body in general. Look at your overall energy. Look at how you're feeling in terms of like hormone balance, if you're a woman specifically, in terms of what your skin looks like, what your hair looks like. Look at your mood. How's that improving? Look at your sleep. How's that improving? Even like your mental clarity, your relationship to food, to diet culture. So there's all these things, and there's like many more that are way more important than your weight. These are measurements that you can look at in order to see that you are doing better, that you are progressing. So I hope that this was helpful. Also remember that if you are someone who has been dieting, who has been following a ton of diet trends, who has been really like focused when it comes to nutrition and like nutrition facts, all of that, you have the knowledge. Like, you do not need to be worried about balanced eating because it's somewhere, it's in your head. And if you just match that with listening to what your body actually tells you, then you're going to be able to eat in a way that is intuitive and that is still balanced. So you don't have to be worried about your body craving things that aren't healthy. It's just like a little period where this happens because your body's finally allowed to have these foods. But then after a while, you will go back to a way of eating that maybe fits more within your like balanced way of eating in a way that is still more intuitive. So I hope that this video kind of helped bridge that gap. I know it can be really hard to go from one to the other, and there are a bunch of ways to do it. Of course, again, you should be the main guide. Your body, your cravings, your hunger, fullness, satisfaction, all of that should be the actual guide, and that's what you should be following. Those are the cues that you should be listening to. But I hope that this helped. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like it and subscribe, and see you on my next one. Bye.